with Marshall Glickman. We have introduced Marshall to you in those invitations that we have sent out, so you know about Marshall's background. Now, this presentation will tie in nicely to the very first presentation we had in this series. You remember when we had the Chief Marketing Officer from the Vegas Golden Knights of the National Hockey League, when he was telling us about the success story, how you introduce a hockey team in the desert and you immediately make them a smashing success, drawing over 18,000 people to a sport in a city which is totally foreign to hockey and where fans do know very little about the sport. Now, there is a reason to this. This doesn't come by default, and we believe that this session with Marshall will give us an explanation why this is possible. So, and the basic thing here is the art of treating sport as a business as opposed to doing it as a win at all cost strategy. So without any further ado, the screen is yours. Just the last thing to our viewers, the screen is shared here, so Marshall will simply tell me when to switch slides. Okay, Marshall, the screen is yours. Go ahead, please, from Portland, Oregon, United States.
Thank you, Simon, very much. And Caroline, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the European Hockey Clubs Association. I will say one more thing about my resume, Simon, and that is I want everybody to know I'm a hockey guy. I grew up in hockey. My father founded a hockey team in Portland, Oregon back in 1960 in the original Western Hockey League. And when I was 11 years old, I was on right wing and the center was Marc Messier, who's now in the Hall of Fame of hockey. So it's something that I still hold dear in my heart. So I grew up in the sport, and as this slide really is just meant to illustrate, this is a business. We could debate whether we like that it's a business or not. That's a different debate. But the fact is today, in 2021, this is a business. And going back to 1960, my father operated very successfully in Portland, Oregon on three principles. Number one, don't lose money. Number two, make money. And number three, win games. But it was in that order of priority. So it wasn't win games at all costs. He always taught me to look after the bottom line in priority. And if we did that well, we knew that we would ultimately also win games because we had greater resources to work with. You can change the slide, Simon. So perhaps the most extreme example of what happens when you run from the principle of winning games at all costs is FC Barcelona. And this has been well documented, but it's really rather an incredible story. This is the #1 revenue club in the world, and they are broke. You can change. So if you consider that Barca is the first and only team in the world to surpass 1 billion in annual revenue, but they've also passed another watermark, which is that their debt, including amounts owed to banks, tax authorities, other teams, and their own players, have ballooned to more than 1.1 billion euros. It's not been widely reported, but they owe their players money, which is not the best situation to have when you want your players to give their all. So Barcelona's annual salary bill now eats up 74% of the club's annual income. And this is basically because of impulsive management, rash decisions, and some would say imprudent contracts. You can change. So when you look at Europe in terms of the ratio of payroll to revenue, PRR, across Europe, it's really out of control. And it's across multiple leagues, multiple countries. For some reason, Major League Soccer made its way into that slide, so it's really out of place. But you can see that European football is running ratios well above 50%. Go ahead. Whereas in the States, we run things differently. In the States, the US model is that we have a link between payroll and revenue. And that has been the key. This was, of course, famously launched by the NBA in its collective bargaining agreement with the players something like 30 years ago. But what this new system, which they call a salary cap, but it's much more complex than only a cap. It's also a salary minimum, and it's also a system that guarantees the players X% of revenues, which has been very successful because it motivates the clubs to optimize the revenues, and it motivates the players for the club to optimize revenues, making the players your partner. Go ahead, Simon. So I believe in this saying from our good friend Socrates, which is the secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but building the new. I work very closely with La Liga and with EuroLeague basketball. I've worked with the French League. I've worked with the French Tennis Federation throughout Europe. And there's a big difference between old school people and new school people. And there is often resistance to embracing change. If there's less resistance to embracing change, I think we'll all be so much more successful. Go ahead, Simon. So this is what my number one principle is when I work with our clients in Europe and in the United States, which is transforming from the old school way of thinking, which is win games and then tickets will just sell themselves. That's a model, to a modern forward thinking model, which is we're in the business of selling a great experience. And that is, in my opinion, in Europe, the number one challenge, but it's also the highest, the best opportunity that we all have. Go ahead, Simon. So I am encouraging a radical change in thinking. And this is, by the way, why I either get hired or not hired, because I've had several prospective clients that do not want to have a radical change of thinking, in which time I tell them, well, okay, no problem, but I'm not your guy. I'm the wrong guy. But the clients that I have that are open to change, obviously change within the context of the local market specificities and the realities of Europe that we have to deal with, and we have to adapt. So I do never suggest cut and paste. What do we do in the States and just say, well, that'll work in Europe? That's not correct. In all cases, we take principles and we adapt to the situation. Go ahead, Simon. So a business strategy is selling out games, because we've learned in Portland, when I ran the Portland Trailblazers, we set a US American professional sports record of 843 consecutive sellouts. That meant that getting a ticket to a Portland Trailblazers game, no matter what game, no matter what opponent, no matter what day of the week, was very, very difficult. But the relationship between supply and demand is what created greater demand. More people wanted in. It allowed us to be really innovative and creative in how we bundled ticket packages, in how we made our games available. Even before streaming and before digital, we were making games available in a theater, live in a theater with 3,000 seats, and we sold season tickets, and we sold out every game in the theater. So we've always felt that everything starts from filling the house. Of course, in the pandemic situation, things are changing, but that's something we believe in strongly. Go ahead, Simon. Winning games is great. It's a strategy, but it's a sports strategy. It's not a business strategy. And look at some of the evidence. In La Liga, the Spanish football league, only 3 of 20 La Liga clubs have won a championship in the last 10 years, and only 4 in the last 20 years. That means it's pretty much predetermined who's going to be at the top of the table at the end of the year because of the system. Juventus in Italy has won the Serie A championship 9 years in a row. Bayern has won the Bundesliga championship 8 years in a row. PSG has won the League One championship 8 of the last 9 years. And in hockey, in the Switzerland National League, which, as you know, has the highest attendance in European hockey, since 1999, only 4 clubs have won a championship. So it doesn't make sense, in our opinion, that winning games is a business strategy. It's a sports strategy. Go ahead, Simon. So just a couple of quotes to share from you. The prospect of losing clubs to insolvencies, losing wages, and losing jobs for players, sporting staff, and other club officials is a concern across our membership. Why I put this on here, and what's interesting to me, is that comes from the General Secretary of the Players Association, football players worldwide. We must ensure that football seizes the opportunity to use COVID to create more balance and create and competitive environment. So the good news, there's very little good news about the pandemic, but there are some good news about the pandemic, and that is it is causing people across the European sports ecosystem to open their eyes, to wake up, and to embrace change. So I'm seeing a pretty rapid acceleration in only a few months' time in the attitude and mentality of the presidents of clubs to embrace change for the next generation. Go ahead, Simon. So we have the European model of, interestingly, it's the opposite of our political system, right? Europe tends to be more socialistic in its politics, but in sports, it's hyper-capitalism. And US tends to be more capitalistic in its politics, yet in sports, we have a very socialist model. In fact, we share revenues equally from national television. We share revenues equally from the sale of merchandise, logo, license, royalties collected off of merchandise. We have revenue sharing formulas. The whole idea is to create competitive balance. Go ahead, Simon. So in Europe, the tendency is that the rich stay rich and get richer, which leads to an obsession with winning. Whereas in the States, we tend to focus more on having competitive and economic balance because we're obsessed with business. Next. In Europe, the attitude has been winning is everything because the clubs that win get the most of the money and they get the best players. In La Liga, even though they do really big numbers in domestic television and international television, guess who gets most of the money? FC Barcelona and Real Madrid, with Atletico just right behind them, leaving a much smaller pool of money available to the other 17 teams, which creates a long list, many years of competitive imbalance. In the States, winning we see as fun. We like to win. It increases profits, but these clubs get close to the same money and cannot get the best players. So failure in the United States is rewarded. We put the teams that finish last at the top when it comes to drafting young players, and we give them additional resources to work with. Go ahead. In Europe, media and supporters, the supporters culture that basically comes from football, has a disproportionate influence. Even clubs that I work with in France and Spain that have relatively small supporters groups, but they're very vocal, and media that's where readership of print media is significantly declining, yet they have an outsized influence over the decisions that the clubs make. Whereas in the States, media is viewed as a communication and branding platform, and supporters are viewed as guests. Go ahead, Simon. In Europe, the threat of relegation and the prospect of promotion forces short-term thinking. And as we saw earlier about the ratio of wages to revenues, it creates very little economic discipline. In the States, we have a closed league model which allows for competitive balance, market stability, and we tend to have more rational decision making. Go ahead, Simon. So in hockey, as you know, the Swiss National League has, the National League in Switzerland has been a closed league, is going to be a closed league, whereas the Swiss league champion will be promoted. So this is similar to the model that EuroLeague basketball is using. And there's a salary cap under consideration with a luxury tax over the cap, which is the NBA's model. Although the NBA's model is really, really complex, and you have to have a degree from Harvard to understand how the NBA collective bargaining system actually works. But it's, in my opinion, it's a good thing that the National League is moving in this direction, as is EuroLeague basketball. Go ahead. So the question that we pose is winning at all costs the right approach. So these are examples that you probably are aware of. In 1998, the European Hockey League champion filed bankruptcy in 2000. So they win the championship, and 2 years later, they file bankruptcy with, my understanding, a star-filled roster. 1995 to 01, the Czech champions, 6 of 7 years. In 2007, dropped from the league, reconstruction. 2008, 2001, Finnish finalists. 2009, Champions League semifinalists. 2016, bankrupt, dropped from the league. Champions League hockey champion in 2014. The club folds in 2016. These are just examples, but it is the consequence of not having financial discipline. It is the consequence of overspending on player wages. And it's not, in our opinion, in the American mentality, it's not just a question of overspending, because, as you well know, NBA players, the average salary of NBA players is something like $6.5 million right now. The average coach's salary is about $4 million in the NBA. In the NHL, player wages, coach wages, sporting staff wages are up dramatically. But the reason for that is there's a direct correlation to revenue growth, and that is the key. Go ahead, Simon. And then in basketball in Europe, you are going to see something. It's already happening. It's not well publicized, but I think is a good example that hockey has to take a look at. EuroLeague basketball right now has 18 clubs. 14 now of those 18 clubs, including Alba Berlin, Bayern Munich, Asvel in Lyon, which is a club partially owned by Olympique Lyonnais, CSK Moscow, Maccabi Tel Aviv, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid. These clubs are part of a closed league. 14 of the 18 clubs have what's called a license, which means there is no relegation and promotion amongst those 14 clubs. There still is relegation and promotion of the next 4 clubs, kind of. in reality, those 4 clubs are awarded wild cards, and those wild cards are awarded not based on sports results particularly, although that does count for something, but they're based on market, venue, business, how they run their business. The next step that EuroLeague's going to take, which people do not know about, so I'll pretend like I didn't tell you, is they're going to close the entire league. And the next step after that, and this is a big deal in Europe, this is going to make a lot of noise, and I realize it's going to be controversial. But the next step after that is all the EuroLeague clubs are going to resign from their national leagues. Now, I know that's going to be a hard idea for a lot of you to sort of process, because if Real Madrid and FC Barcelona leave the ACB in Spain, what becomes of the ACB? And that's a very real and it's a very fair question. My prediction is that if they're smart, they'll change the model, and that is that the A team will play exclusively in EuroLeague, the top level competition, but they will also put together a B team, which will play in the ACB, which is a place to develop players and feed players up to the A team, A level. That is very much how the system works, in the States. I think you all know that. Go ahead, Simon. So just a few quick slides to focus on why, in our opinion, behaving like a business is fundamental. And that is, if you look at this research that was done by the European Clubs Association of Football, which is, my understanding, the equivalent of your organization in hockey, they went out and did research across multiple countries. So this research was conducted in Italy, Spain, Germany, and the UK. And these are really eye-opening, in my opinion, really eye-opening statistics. You can see that people that are really fans of the sport are in the minority. Most people, I know the perception is, oh, football is so huge and everybody loves football, but that's not reality. And you can see, go ahead, Simon. And this is the one that really stands out to me. Look at the 16 to 24-year-old age group and look at the difference of avid fans, or even just fans, not only just huge fans, but just fans, versus the number of people that have no interest whatsoever in the sport or only follow the sport in passing. I mean, this, if we think about this in a football context, this is a serious, serious problem, because their fan base is aging. And as their fan base ages, if Gen Z is disinterested, and if they're not offering Gen Z the kind of experience, whether it's a digital experience out of venue, or if it's an experience in venue, if they're not responsive to Gen Z's desires and wants and sensitivity and alignment of values, they're going to be in big trouble in, I predict, in the next several years. Go ahead, Simon. And you can again see this here. Here's just another example of the same thing. The number of people that are real fans of football. You wonder, will this happen in hockey as well? Will this happen in any other sport? What the statistics and the research tell us in the United States is that Gen Z is losing interest in professional sports. And that is a serious, serious issue that we should all be focused and paying attention to. Go ahead, Simon. So you can see here, the Gen Zs will radically alter how people are going to consume sports. And if we don't adapt, I think we're in trouble. Mainstream is out. Alternatives, niche, personalization is in. Gen Zs, what they want. So in our view, you got to give it to them. They have short attention spans. They eat, sleep, and breathe tech. They're independent. They're pragmatic, and they're hardworking. They're focused on their health. Big increases, as we all know, in sales of home health applications. Apple Fitness just launched many other fitness applications. They care about the planet. They're very global in their perspective. So this is an issue for some countries that are losing their culture. That's a conversation that's important to have. But nonetheless, because of the internet and because that internet is in their pocket and because they're interacting with people all over the world all the time, every day, the reality is they're global citizens who are influenced by other cultures and what other people are doing. Social media and influencers are part of their lives. They like to hang out with their friends, which is a great opportunity for us in professional sports because we offer the ultimate place to hang out. They have very different media consumption habits. My son is 20 years old. He's a huge sports fan of all sports. He loves the NBA and he mostly watches it via highlights on his phone. So they're basically bored by traditional sports. So if we keep trying to sell tradition and history, I think Gen Zs are not, the research says, it's not just what I think, the research says that we're going to all be in trouble. Go ahead, Simon. And so this is just how I want to close my comments and then talk to you and take questions, which is we need to understand what's changing and the transition from maturists and baby boomers and Gen X and then millennials, which are Gen Y, and now Gen Z. And I would hugely encourage all of you, whether you're in a big market, a small market, a big venue, small venue, doesn't matter. League One, League Two, doesn't matter. You have to respond to the changing consumption habits of the new generation of customers who are going to be the ones who are going to be making the buying decisions and have the disposable income in the very near future. So that's how I wanted to make my remarks, and I'd love to take questions and quit talking and just hear your questions and respond.
Okay, thank you very much, Marshall, for this wonderful presentation. I have now stopped sharing so I can see you and others. And I encourage you to ask questions to this quite thought-provoking presentation. As usual, I will warm up with a question to Marshall. Marshall, while football in Europe is very much a tradition sport, because most of football in Europe is has taken the inspiration from England and Germany and Italy, and they have basically, or I don't know of any football league in Europe that doesn't have the traditional promotion relegation system. In ice hockey in Europe, we are much more influenced by North America and the National Hockey League in particular. And if I just look at the biggest leagues in Europe, which are affiliated with the Club Alliance, we have, for example, the Austrian Ice League. They don't have promotion relegation. The British Elite Ice Hockey League, they don't have promotion relegation. The Finnish league has stopped promotion relegation. The Swiss league, as you said, they are thinking about stopping promotion relegation to close the league. The German league for many years had stopped promotion relegation, but they are reintroducing promotion relegation. Now, this was a long start to the question, but my question is, Marshall, you knowing European sports and European hockey, would you really advise the European leagues go into this direction of closing their leagues a la American style and pursue competitive balance as well as economic balance? Is this what you're saying, Marshall?
Yes, with caveats. I think you have to be a little careful because, you know, it's there's a lot of resistance to change. And so EuroLeague is going to set the table, right? I mean, EuroLeague, because, and the reason why is they're pan-European, right? EuroLeague cuts across Eastern Europe to Western Europe. EuroLeague's #1 priority growth market, the German clubs that are on with us probably won't like this, is Germany. They're going to be pouring a lot of money. They're bringing in private equity. There's going to be a lot of resources put into growing the sport in Germany. As you know, Alba Berlin and Bayern Munich both have permanent licenses, meaning that there is no relegation. How they perform, the sports results in the German basketball league have no bearing on whether they're going to play in EuroLeague or not. And eventually they're only going to play in EuroLeague. So yes, I think generally we're at a place now in kind of the evolution, Simon, where going to a closed league or at least a hybrid model. EuroLeague does have a second competition, just like many other leagues. So they have the Euro Cup. And so the Euro Cup champion will continue to be promoted. So they're going to leave a slot open for the Euro Cup champion to come up, which I think is kind of interesting. So I think maybe, Simon, that there's a way to kind of close the league, but still take advantage of creating some of the drama of being promoted up. But of course, if there's only going to be only the club on the bottom will get relegated, you know, year over year. But it does create a little bit of drama at that, you know, kind of at the bottom of the table, which I like.
Joanne?
Sorry about that. Did I answer the question, or do you want me to go deeper?
No, it's okay. If our crowd wants you to go deeper, I'm sure that they will ask. Now, a question here from Mr. Petr Serovatko, who is a part owner of the Czech club Liberec. Hi, Marshall. Could you please repeat the 3 principles that your dad lived by? I think that you had it in the beginning, right?
Thank you. My father passed this year at 97 years old, so I hope he hears me right now, because this was a lesson, very old school lesson, but it's a very applicable lesson. The #1 principle is do not lose money. The #2 principle, make money. The #3 principle, win games. So by focusing on economic stability, they were able to win games. In fact, they played for the championship 6 out of 10 years. So they were very successful on the ice. So I'm not suggesting that we ought to not care about sports results. I'm suggesting that you need to have economic health in order to have good sports results, that there is a correlation between those two. I'm also suggesting that market, you know, some kind of stability is important. And to go back to your first question, Simon, on that note, this is the problem with relegation, right? The problem is, I'll give you an example from EuroLeague. I was negotiating a deal on behalf of EuroLeague many years ago with Champion, which is a merchandise company, big one. And they were very excited to do business with EuroLeague. And one of our clubs that year was Alba Berlin. Big club, big market. You know, they were relegated. So the deal fell apart, because one minute we have Berlin as a market, and the next day we had, I don't know, Dusseldorf, with all respect to Dusseldorf. So, you know, that's very hard to do business when you don't have market stability. And today, venue quality matters as well. If we're going to be in business, we shouldn't be playing in dumps, because the truth of the matter is Gen Z won't tolerate it. So we have to be very careful about that.
So immediately after your answer, Petr from Liberec responded, I would put that in stone somewhere. So you made quite an impression there, or rather your dad's 3 principles. We have a next question. It also comes from the Czech Republic, but from the club Osilaři Třinec, from Mr. Jakub Mikulik. And the question is, are the numbers similar in the American Hockey League as well? Meaning percentage spent on player salaries. So the
Yeah,
question is about the American Hockey League. Do you have the knowledge about the American Hockey League, Marshall?
I don't know precisely because, but I think the answer is actually they probably spend less on wages. In other words, I think the ratio is less than it would be. The NHL is around 45%. So I'm a little bit guessing here. I'm semi-knowledgeable. I'm guessing it hovers somewhere in the 35 to 40% range. You know, the American Hockey League and the East Coast Hockey League both are very viable leagues, and the clubs that are well managed make a lot of money because the player salaries are relatively modest, yet the popularity, when they're in the right market, in the right venue, when they're managed the right way, it's great. It's entertainment. In Portland, Oregon, where I live, I don't know if you all know where Portland is. This is the home of Nike, would be the best reference I could give you. And by the way, also for the Germans, the home of Adidas America. So the American headquarters of Adidas is also here in Portland. We have a junior hockey team in the Western Hockey League that plays in a league with, there's two teams in the Seattle area, Spokane, and the rest are in Canada. They bring 8,000 people a game. The players are 16 to 18-year-olds. They make almost nothing. I mean, you know, and the Winterhawks are printing money. Let's all be honest about it. They're printing money. They make more money probably than many National Hockey League teams. And the fans love it. And the best players move quickly to the NHL. And so there's excitement around the sport because the creme de la creme move up. But it's exciting hockey. They're great skaters, but it's also really a great it's affordable family entertainment, and it's a great hangout for young adults. And on those kind of two groups, they do really, really well.
Thank you, Marshall. Here is maybe not so much a question, but a comment from Mikko Mattila, who represents Ilves from the Finnish town of Tampere. He writes like that, Marshall. Top leagues rely heavily into lucrative TV and media broadcasting contracts. If Gen Z is not boarding in, if not boarding in, this money also devalues moving out from professional top leagues, a big issue for clubs and leagues to address. Luckily, life expectancy has been in steady growth. So this is more a comment from Mikko more than a question. How do you comment on this comment from Mikko, Marshall?
Well, as we know, you're right. In Europe, there is far too much dependency. I'm talking about the big leagues, especially football, on what you say are lucrative media and broadcasting deals. You're correct. Far too much dependency. For let's say the Portland Trailblazers, NBA team here in Portland, national TV revenues that are brought in by the league office, and then the revenues are equally distributed to all 30 teams, represent about only 20%. It's a big number, but it's only 20%, maybe 25% of the club's overall revenues. So there's more balance. They're not dependent on any one thing. Here's the key with Gen Zs is streaming. I think we all know this, and streaming is a tremendous opportunity because you may have fewer viewers if you develop a over-the-top OTT platform where you're marketing your games directly to the consumer, but without working through the middleman, who's the broadcaster. The broadcaster is paying you, but they're obviously paying you because they're making more money on it through subscription fees and advertising and everything else. So we are learning in the States that in some cases we're cutting out the middleman and we're broadcasting direct because we don't need to go through cable or satellite or television networks necessarily anymore. And of course, streaming is where Gen Z is consuming audiovisual. That's where they want to go. So we have woken up in the United States and said we better deliver them our content in the places where they are. Because my kid who's 20 is not turning on NBC or CBS or ABC, the big television networks in the United States, very often. Now, that's not to say that that's going away, but what we're doing is we're finding a balance. So the leagues, the smart leagues, are carving out streaming rights, and they're selling smaller packages of games to the big broadcasters. They're selling other packages of games to the pay TV operators who are seeing declining subscription, right? So we have to be very careful. EuroLeague made a deal in Spain with DAZN. I think you've all heard of DAZN because they're moving in Europe. DAZN wrote the biggest check, so they took the money. But guess what? DAZN has almost no subscribers in Spain. EuroLeague did not do themselves any favor whatsoever by eliminating the exposure of their game in Spain. We have to find and be more innovative in how we model our rights. Some games should be out there on free TV so we can promote the game. Some games perhaps can go to TV because pay TV has to pay you a lot of rights fees for your games. But other games, and we're seeing definitely a movement, ought to be streamed and sold by clubs and leagues direct to consumers and cutting out the middleman, because that's where Gen Z is.
Here is another comment from Finland, from Mr. Kai Koskinen. Again, more of a comment more than a question. He writes like this: European top clubs intend to form a closed Champions League with only very limited opportunity to participate from outside clubs is driven by the appetite for media rights money. This will make national leagues and other clubs poorer. There is a major concern how this influences football in general. And then Kai adds, closed leagues may distribute wealth more evenly inside the league, but creates even bigger gap between top leagues, teams, and the rest. What is your comment to that?
I strongly agree with what you said, but I think it's inevitable. And that's the thing. I mean, we could sit and spend time over beer debating the merits of moving in the direction that it's moving. But in my opinion, and it's just an opinion, and because we're in a closed conversation, I will say it, I wouldn't say it so loud publicly. The reality of the situation is that Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, Ajax, Porto, Bayern Munich, AS Roma, Inter Milan, AC Milan, Juventus, these big clubs are going to separate themselves. And because they have the biggest brands, the biggest markets, and the biggest stadiums. And if I were running a football league in Europe, which I'm not, instead of fighting and trying to stop that from happening, because all of the presidents of the leagues are trying to stop that from happening, perhaps that's the stance they need to take publicly. So I understand that. But at the same time, behind the scenes, I would be spending a lot of time reorganizing myself for what I believe is the inevitable future. And I don't think that has to be a bad thing. Remember, if FC Barcelona and Real Madrid do not play in La Liga and only play in this Super League in the future, that means that all the other teams have a chance to win a championship for the first time in 20 years. That's not a bad thing. It means that everybody has a chance. It's a more competitive league. It's a more interesting league. Will revenues decrease? Yes, but so too will expenses. So I'm more interested in looking at margins than looking at gross revenues, because I showed you the Barca example. How can you explain that the only team in the world that generates over $1 billion in revenue is broke? How do you explain that? So these clubs have been their own worst enemy. And they've created this problem because the leagues collectively have done nothing to stop the Barcelonas of the world and the Piagets of the world from going crazy. And so here we are. So I think the next inevitable step is we're going to see a super league in football. So a lot of people disagree with me. I realize that's an open debate. It's not popular with my clients, but this is what EuroLeague basketball is going to do. So we'll see.
Marshall, this can also be now, before I ask the next question, I want to remind the crowd that you are of course free to ask Marshall direct questions as long as you raise this little yellow hand. So you must not only write your questions, you can ask Marshall questions, and he will be very happy to answer that. But Marshall, here is a question that connects to what you just said. The equivalent to the Champions League in ice hockey is the Champions Hockey League, which has been around since 2014. And the Champions Hockey League operates basically just like the Champions League in football, that you first need to do something on home ice. You need to win a championship or be the regular season winner in order to qualify for the Champions Hockey League. But do you foresee the same evolution in European ice hockey that will in the future maybe permanent the Champions Hockey League by having permanent participation from the big clubs in Europe? The Eisbären Berlin, Djurgården Stockholm, IFK Helsinki, and clubs like that. Do you see that this can come to hockey as well?
I mean, I don't know enough to give you a well-informed perspective I'm talking about the hockey ecosystem specifically. But I think the evolution to closed systems or hybrid kind of open closed systems, and the evolution towards competitive balance, meaning a sharing of the collective revenues on a more equal basis. I think it's inevitable. And I also think it's very difficult to have an economically viable business when you have a league that has huge markets and really high quality modern venues on the one hand, and in the same league could be a very small market with a very small venue that's out of date and doesn't function very well. I mean, we have in La Liga, they have a club in a place called Eibar. I don't know if you've ever been to Eibar, but I can tell you, you can walk the entire city in about 10 minutes. It's a little tiny city with a little tiny stadium who's figured out how to win enough games to stay up at League One, but they can't compete. And so I think, we have to face up to the realities of, big, in the States, we determine who gets to be in the National Hockey League based on markets and venues. That's the criteria. So you saw the NHL going into Las Vegas, as Simon talked about, and you've heard from them, but also Tampa, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee. These are places where there's nobody on ice skates in these places, believe me. There's no hockey culture in these places. It's pure entertainment, high quality for sure, but pure entertainment, and it's working. And my friends in Seattle, Washington, who launch a new NHL team next fall, they haven't dropped the puck yet, and they've been sold out for almost 2 years because they figured out how to market this thing in the right way. And it's a big market. The NHL went to Seattle because it's a major market with a venue that that appeals to people, and particularly Gen Z.
Okay, Marshall, we have two raised hands from Kai Koskinen in Finland and Alex Jäger from Germany of the Champions Hockey League. We start with Alex. Alex, go ahead with your question to Marshall.
Marshall.
Alex Jäger.
Yeah. First, thank you for this great open talk. It speaks a lot out of my mind, out of my heart, and it's great to hear that. One question that raised my mind, and this is maybe a more European perspective. It is, when you look at it, we always think it's common sense not to lose any money. But how do we deal with clubs and owners in those clubs that just don't have this idea, that just don't, not care is the wrong word, but like at FC Barcelona, where not losing money is no principle, because that has an effect on the whole league then, and it separates and it makes everything unstable and kind of like unknown. How is this thing ever get? What's your suggestion on how should leagues deal with this?
Well, there's two things that leagues are, as you know, doing, which is this concept of financial fair play, which is having, it's working in some places to some effect and not working in other places. In football, it's actually working pretty well in Spain, on balance. I'm not saying it's perfect, but they have very strict financial controls. The key being that they really do audit. They really go in and look at the numbers hard. Whereas in France, it's kind of a joke because Piaget is owned by in effect, the Qatari government. It's kind of a quasi, state-owned football team. So they find ways to circumvent financial fair play by signing sponsorships with Qatari companies that are way overvalued, for example. So the financial fair play system is certainly a step in the right direction. I prefer the salary cap. Now, you got to be careful because salary cap is a misleading term. It's not a cap. It's really a revenue sharing, very complex revenue sharing formula, by the way, but it's working. What the salary cap did is it made the players partners. And to me, this is the key. The players' interest and the league's interest and the club's interest in the United States is, I'm talking about their economic interest, okay, is aligned. The fact is the players at the beginning were very resistant, as you would expect. They want to get paid. But now today's modern players and coaches, by the way, it's now out, it's the whole ecosystem. They understand that if our economic interests are aligned, then all we care about now is growing. As long as we grow and as long as the sport appeals to the next generation of consumers, then people will be rewarded financially. And when you align the financial interests of the parties, you get much greater cooperation. I mean, we have NBA coaches and NHL, by the way, who have microphones on during the games and take interviews while the game is going on. I mean, that was crazy years ago. The coaches would say, no way, they have to focus and concentrate. No, we understand, yes, the sport is important. The integrity of the game is important, but we have to also entertain our customers, our fans. And so I happen to think that beginning to implement a system that is more similar to the North American model will happen in Europe. I think it's inevitable. I think it's important. Once EuroLeague basketball moves to a closed league, which I told you is happening in steps, they will also enter into the first ever formal collective bargaining relationship with their players. And that also is going to set a big precedent, I think, in Europe, which will be copied by others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Marshall. Alex, if you have a follow-up question, we first let in Kai Koskinen. Kai, you raised your hand. Please go ahead with your question, Kai.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Marshall. This was really interesting what you just presented. Yeah, we are clearly struggling in European with a European tradition compared to the US tradition. And I'm a co-owner of biggest football club in Finland and now currently working in hockey. So I have pretty good view on also on the football side. And what I think is that in Finland at least we have a bit of a problem that in ice hockey we have adopted this closed league approach, but we still don't have all the elements in place to distribute the wealth in a way that you are doing in the US leagues. So we are kind of halfway there. And but what I also I'm a bit afraid is that when we have a small market, we don't have the kind of entertainment value coming from kind of a big market, and we're a bit struggling to grow the league. So we have now nobody's going to be relegated, but we still cannot have any growth there. And at the same time, since we don't have the promotion relegation kind of a dynamics in place, we are pretty much killing the next level of hockey in Finland. So my question is that I perfectly understand that there is a kind of a European league for basketball and football and maybe ice hockey. But if we close the national leagues, what does that do then for the kind of a national circumstances where the clubs try to work? And then another question, when you explained how the Generation Z is going to behave in the future, my young son is very attracted to the international superstars and not that keen to see local hockey or not local football. And now if we narrow the interest to the very limited leagues where we have the biggest superstars, it takes even more attention away from the kind of a national leagues and local clubs. And eventually, is this good for the sports? And is it just enough to have a lot of entertainment on a kind of a really high quality international scale? But what do we do then in a kind of a local scale? So I'm not sure if we are shooting our own leg here while still believing exactly what you said and developing the top level, that's for sure. But what happens to the sports?
It's a huge question. You're very perceptive, obviously, to bring it up. It's a problem. I mean, I don't have a magic wand and a perfect answer for you. It's complicated. I will tell you this, in the States, minor league sports, specifically in ice hockey and in baseball, have been able to reposition themselves and have been, for the most part, there are exceptions, for the most part have been highly successful, profitable ways to not only develop the next generation of players and talent, because they're bringing up talent, but also to provide people with affordable family entertainment. And I don't mean just families, but, you know, young people. I mean, in Portland here, we have a small baseball team, which is like, would be the equivalent of like third division. Okay, so pretty, you know, low level from a sporting point of view. But the reality is that 8,000 people go to their baseball games because it's really fun. And it's a really good time, and it's a nice day with the family or with your friends, and you get to have a beer and you get to eat good food. And the thing about these players at this age is they relate to the players. So the players are on social media, there's interactivity, there's engagement. Now, I know that's kind of culturally, that's an American thing. I get that, you know. I mean, we also, as you know, we go to college sports, which is, from a sporting perspective, is not even close to pro sports. But there's a huge tradition around college sports. So I would just make the case that the second tier below the creme de la creme needs to reposition itself and needs, you know, and when we talk about entertainment, I'm not talking about cheerleaders and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about giving people a great experience. And that means different things to different people. And that's the key to understanding what that really is. so that when they, you need people to come to the rink. Because that, we can't, especially at a lower level, you're not going to be able to get broadcasting money or anything meaningful. The minor league sports in our country get almost nothing from broadcast. Some of them are figuring out how to do direct to consumer streaming, but it's a really relatively modest amount of money that's brought in. What they're really doing is advertising why it's fun to come in person, but they are very much in the live entertainment business, and it's working really, really very well. But it's going to be very complicated in Europe. I don't pretend that it's not, because people are used to a different tradition and a different system. But I think that the next generation is going to be embracing of these kinds of changes. The question is, which clubs, which leagues have the courage to make these changes in the face of controversy, because there will be controversy. There will be press against this. There will be traditionalists who oppose these kinds of changes. But I think you can build a business model for a second league below the top tier league that is viable, because I think people want to gather, particularly with the pandemic. People want to get out. People want to hang out with each other. People want to socialize. Business people want to network with other business people. And hockey is a fast-paced, awesome game. It's a great game to watch. It doesn't really matter if it's the best players or the second or the third or the fourth. It's still a great game. I don't mind watching 10-year-olds play hockey. I mean, we have to be, more tuned in to the experience side of this than just the sporting side.
And if I may add, this is exactly how we also see that, in addition to maybe, of course, developing the digital kind of a connection and the what we offer there, but to be the live, to be the local even more than we used to be, because we cannot win the digital game anyway. We need to have the service in place, but I still think that being meaningful and being relevant in the kind of a community where you are, that must be the strong foothold for us.
Well, and that's the thing, because what we're learning here is that sports teams, even small sports teams in small markets, are platforms. They're platforms, and they're platforms to bring communities together. And, we're beginning to learn in the States, even in this age of very divisive politics, right? I'm sure it's the same in your countries. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of tension between people right now with COVID and everything else. But the one thing everybody agrees on in Portland is they love the Trailblazers. And I know, okay, they're an NBA team, but guess what? People also love the Portland Winterhawks, and they're a junior A hockey team that plays with 16 to 18-year-olds, and 8,000 people go to their games. And, they're sad if they lose, they're happy if they win, but win or lose, they still go to their games because there's a community built around that. There's a community of people that love the Winterhawks. And I think that kind of model can work in Europe just as well as it works here.
Marshall, thank you very much. Thank you, Kai, for your questions. Thank you, Alex Jäger. We have surpassed our limit, 5 o'clock, by 7 minutes. But of course, if you have one additional question, I'm sure that Marshall will stay around. So if there is another question to Marshall, he will be happy to answer this for you.
Simon?
Just add that, as usual, you will get a video recording of this session, and you will also get Marshall's presentation as a PDF file. So you will get full documentation. So is there any more question before we end the session with Marshall?
Simon? Hello,
Yes,
Simon?
I think it's Zoltan Kovac sitting in a car somewhere in Hungary. Is that correct?
I love it.
Yeah, hello. It was really interesting to listen, and we can read something about that. So maybe there is a book, a handbook for the team managers or somebody who would like to start a professional team. So maybe US has a book about how to build a good hockey team or a good sport team.
Well, the book is in my head. I haven't written it yet, but you know, but that's a good idea. I should write a book. You know, there's many, Simon, we can circle back. There's many different references that I could recommend that are great reads for people that are interested in that, because there's not any one, there's no Bible. You know, there's many different iterations of different opinions and perspectives on your question. And by the way, just so you know, if any of you want to reach out to me, you know, I don't charge money to have an email exchange. Okay, so I'm happy to you know, take, if you have any other questions or, you know, want to have a call independently, I'm happy to talk with you.
Thank you.
So one last question, maybe from Petr Serovac again from Liberec, part owner of this professional club in Czech Republic. What is your take on esports, Marshall? Is it a threat or an opportunity? Can there be any overlap with traditional sports? Question mark.
I think it's obvious that there is a huge opportunity. It's rapidly growing. Esports is growing at a faster pace than any traditional sport in the United States, but also the same in Asia, Germany. I mean, you know, Gen Z is Gen Z. Gen Z thinks alike, no matter what culture they're from, what language they speak. And esports is a really, really big opportunity. The whole opportunity behind gaming and frankly betting, and I know that's a dirty word in some places. In Spain, they just outlawed betting sponsorships, which is going to be a really big loss for all the clubs. We're talking about a lot of money. Whereas in America, we used to be against betting, and now we're embracing big time, and we're monetizing it big time. I mean, across all leagues, because betting causes people to be engaged. And when people are engaged, viewership goes up, and subscriptions to over-the-top, you know, streaming platforms increases, and the amount of time that people spend watching a game increases. They're paying more attention. So we like betting, to be honest, in the States, and esports is comes from that culture. And, you know, I remember Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, said 2 years ago that NBA will someday be bigger than the NBA. Now, that's a little bit of a provocative statement, and I think he was sort of, you know, blowing smoke a little bit. But I understand the message he's trying to send. If you can have esports around the game, if what we need to do to show people the excitement of hockey is take, you know, is create leagues around, you know, digital forms of hockey. I mean, that's better than people playing Fortnite if you care about hockey. And guess what? I mean, I hate when my kid wastes time on video games, to be honest. I hate it, but I can't stop it. So I would rather try to channel that energy in a positive way. And if you're in business, yeah, I mean, it extends the brand. It creates new monetization opportunities, new sponsorship opportunities. It's nothing but a positive.
Marshall, thank you very much for doing this for us. It has been incredibly appreciated by our crowd. Thank you very much to the participants. We end the session right now, and as I said, you will get full documentation within 30 minutes or so, and Caroline is taking care of this. And this was the last of this series of tutorials, and we will soon start working on the new series of tutorials. And if you have any advice to us, me or Caroline at the EHC office, about the topics that you want to have covered, don't hesitate to contact us. So again, thank you very much, Marshall in Portland. Thank you very much to all participants. Have a great rest of the day and see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Simon and Caroline. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thanks.